What is the worst example of a degenerate group that is glamorized in popular culture? Narcos. I was down in Medellin in January and our walking tour guide wouldn't say the name Escobar because the locals might think we were a narco tour, which has apparently become very popular and get mad at us for glorifying it. The Mafia, with movies and shows like Goodfellas, The Godfather, and The Sopranos, it's easy to forget that they're, violent murderers, who can and will often get whacked at any moment, probably, IDK. People only pay attention to the first half of mob movies where the lifestyle and even the violence feels badass and glamorous. They forget the second half when the guys lose their friends and family, the empire falls apart and they become tweaked out paranoid and pathetic druggies. Hex angels. They should be wiped out. It's like people think they're old school and not bad anymore because they buy bikes for kids. They are the top dogs of human trafficking and running girls. Disgusting pigs. My dad was chased by them. I don't remember the exact reason, but he did something to pee them off because they were being dongs. They all got their bikes and chased my dad and his buddy in their truck for miles. My dad was able to juke them, but he was pretty sure if they got him he'd be fricked. Gangs. I really like the show Gangland, but it occurred to me that literally every episode is the exact same. Every single gang claims to be the biggest and the baddest. They are also all incredibly juvenile. There's a reason why gangs recruit elementary school kids to do their dirty work. Sociopaths, psychopaths. People with antisocial personality disorder are usually not as charming, calculating, and misunderstood genius YSDV crime thriller sociopaths, especially when they are serial killers. They might be good liars and pick up on social cues, but they are usually not interested enough in other people's feelings to manipulate them in the very intense ways that this happens in Law and Order, etc. Most people convicted of more than one count of murder are probably diagnosed APD, which at its core means someone whose empathy is not triggered by other people's feelings, has a narcissistic worldview, essentially just doesn't see other people as subjects like himself, then usually combined with sadism and violent tendencies. Most sociopathic serial killers aren't Ed Kemper and Hannibal Lecter, self-aware of their drives and perversions and masterfully manipulative. They are just dudes who love to kill and don't feel like it is wrong. Social norm of why is wrong does not apply. They are rarely geniuses and often have a lower than average IQ. Source: my husband works in inpatient mental health care. People with APD are often huge jerks who try to be manipulative, but they aren't necessarily killers or calculating geniuses. They are likely to be domestic abusers, behave well when it might benefit them, etc. But a huge sign of personality disorders is actually trouble controlling one's affect. So the cool, calculated killer fantasy is usually inaccurate. I also had a friend who worked in prisons, and she said that most of the inmates were diagnosed as sociopaths. Whether or not they met all the criteria to have that diagnosis is more iffy, as the main symptom for someone who is in prison is violent behavior, and that these people were usually not all that smart. Definitely not geniuses like many of our famous serial killers. I used to talk to a guy online who was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. He was very kind, just by his own word extremely bored all the time, and quite lonely. I feel like murderers make up a pretty small proportion of people WASPed, but that's also where most people's familiarity with the condition comes from. In real life, most of the people involved in organized crime are broke, fat, stupid, lazy alcoholics, and not at all organized. Not really. You only hear about the crappy organized crime groups. The good ones don't make the news and are pretty well off. Bikies or bikers if you're in the US, shows like Sons of Anarchy make them seem glamorous, but in reality they are mostly drug dealers and violent petty criminals. It took me a second to realize you weren't talking about bicycles. I felt so attacked. Hitmen. The movie always try to make out that they have glamorous jobs just because they kill only bad people. They are murderers. There is nothing likable or good or funny about them. You're thinking of government assassins, not hitmen. Hitmen is supposed to refer to people outside controlled agencies taking lives for money. Yeah, people like the Hitman Agent 47 series, but not cause he occasionally kills bad guys. More like cause he's super good at what he does and that's interesting. The poor. They love making movies about happy people in poor neighborhoods who just need each other and enough cheap booze to be happy. It's miserable in reality because being poor sucks. It'd be some boring butt crap. Gangs thug culture, glorifying drugs and violence then downplaying the importance of education is rotting the lower class. All those housewives, horrible women exploited and exploiting women. They're probably over in popularity by now, but the fact that they spread and grew in the first place just makes me cringe. Pimps, yeah, call me an old fart. I don't give a crap. But exactly when did that word become someone that is looked up to, respected, and used as a complimentary term? I simply don't get it. I had one of my 10th graders use it in one of my classes, and I directed him to look up the history of the word and what it actually means. Outside of ignorant rap hip hop culture, he was surprised at what he found, and I'm fairly sure he wasn't even aware that there was a negative connotation to the word. For a generation that squawks about sexism and equality as much as the current one does, they sure seem to embrace that term. Not just the pimps either. I used to watch Night Court when that was on and recall movies like Dr. Detroit. They act like pimps and prostitutes are really great people who just do something a little different. Pimps are essentially sex slave owners and the prostitutes are often drugged and abused. It is a really sick, sad system that people still buy into. Pirates in today's popular culture are often glamorized. They were thieves, rapists and murderers. Not a great bunch of people. Not to mention backed by the English and Dutch governments. Chefs. The more I read about the restaurant industry, the more it seems that chefs are basically degenerate psychos. Nobody halfway normal would want a job like that. They're either psychos or overly passionate. Either way, an angry chef is a scary chef. Mad Men glorified a bunch of butthole alcoholics that destroyed their families and relationships for the art of selling coke. Con men. Movies and TV shows portray them as Robin Hood types, who only target the corrupt rich guys. In reality, they don't care if you're rich or poor. As long as they get your money, they'll rip you off. I don't know if glamorized is the right way to say it, but I do think all the cops and follow some inmates in prison reality TV does give a lot of attention to a certain group from a certain background that reflect very badly on the people that are working hard to make an honest living. School public shooters. The news talks almost exclusively about how many people were murdered, and how it went down and what led to the killer doing it. The news mentions the killer's name and motives a million times, but very rarely the victims. I hate how these people are eternally glamorized like killing a dozen people is a high score. It's sick. We need to stop giving these people their fame. Being a rural blue-collar dude. Lots of movies, reality television act like there are a bunch of virtuous dudes who have been on the land for hundreds of years doing some family tradition way of life that they are struggling to hold on to. Chances are most of their family immigrated to the USA as the early 1900s, and they own their land so financially they are okay. If they don't have a good job, or own their land, well they are completely fricked. Also, no one is stupid enough to engage in genuinely illegal activity like moonshining or poaching ginseng on a camera. I love the pop culture country. Everyone is smart, good looking, well educated, progressive, thoughtful, and kind. Rural America, according to pop culture, is not a cultural wasteland filled with bad music, pickup trucks with Confederate flags on them and camouflage patterned clothing, but a melting pot of diverse people with hobbies that aren't confined to shooting things. Modern rappers like Lil Yachty. The music is so awful that just threading the lyrics without the terrible mumble rap makes me cringe. Young Thug speaks in hieroglyphics. Hackers. They aren't militarized. 80s soundbite pumping computer science pros fighting for freedom of the common man. Some of them just steal your crap and sell it to the highest bidder. Others will frick with you because it's funny, and it totally is. LMAO. Well, the sum of them is pretty important here. Most hackers won't steal your credit card. They just hack as a hobby. Most hackers mod your game, put macOS on their HP or, yes, do research on vulnerabilities. Political bigsies. These people, both left and right, use such inflammatory language and thus create a divide between the two sides. It's not the fact that they're doing this, but the fact that they're being allowed to, being greenlit, and getting egged on by their entourage and spectators who go yath quain murder that conservative trash and get fricked. Liberal snowflake. It's becoming frightening that people are being silenced simply because of their ideals, even if they're not dangerous or radical. Completely agree. And in the US it's nearly impossible to find unbiased news. Everyone pushes a narrative and the extremists on both sides are getting worse. It feels like we are reaching a boiling point, and unfortunately the young protesters on both sides don't realize they are being used to stir divisive tendencies and not actually push for real change. School shooters. It's sickening to see the level of coverage the individual shooters get about their lives, past etc., instead of the victims. There's a small subset of usually young people who romanticize them to the point of it being like a celebrity crush. Disgusting. US military. Every single person I knew that joined from my high school would have been working at Burger King if they hadn't joined. Many of them aren't very smart, know little about the world which they are tasked to defend, and are absolute buttholes. May the downvoting commence. The biggest problem with the military is the blind hero worships from the general public because of that romanticized view. Not every person in the military is a hero. Most are just normal people doing a normal job for the extra benefits. It gives some of them an ego bigger than they deserve. Che Guevara was a racist, book burning, music banning, executioner who did as he was told, for a regime that killed innocents without trial. The free-thinking, anti-establishment type that wears his face on his shirt stands for pretty much the opposite of what he did, all while idolizing him. I do enjoy the fact that he'd be rolling over in his grave at the fact that some cheeky capitalist decided to sell shirts with his face on it for profit. Professional YouTubers. Give me a freaking break. Most of them are not uber talented geniuses that a lot of kids today think they are. They're just tech savvy people that put on a good show. From what I can see, most have developed massive egos. This goes for anyone that's claim to fame is that they were on a reality show. Easy champ. You got dumped on a fake romance show by a woman with less talent than you. You didn't win an Oscar. Mumble rappers. I find it entertaining how vapid and crass they are even when making attempts to show emotion or personality. Well, to each their own. Biker gangs. Some are just people doing it as a hobby for rallies, but real biker gangs are criminal rapists and murderers. They also deal drugs. Cheaters. Almost every dang TV show and film has some form of cheating, and lots of them try to make us feel bad for the twats when it inevitably goes south for them. Rich people for just being rich. No talent, just has money and is on TV just doing whatever and being overly dramatic. Cowboys. Texas Rangers in westerns are highly glamorized as rugged individualists who get the job done when in reality they were like the SS, but instead of going after Jews they went after natives. Source: Empire of the Summer Moon. Hip hop and rap culture. The music aspect of it is fine, but the culture of degrading women, drugs and alcohol, and to a certain extent, street gang and life of crime mentality is very toxic. And the strong association of this music and its culture with the African American population is damaging to their progression as a people. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.